What if I told you that the expensive 100% fluorocarbon line you spooled up, the one the package promised was virtually invisible, is the single most obvious, attention-grabbing thing in the water right now? That on a bright winter day, it might as well be a glowing neon rope. Sounds crazy, right? Today we are not talking about lures or technique. We are talking about the one connection you have to the fish, and how, in the specific light of late winter, it could be the only reason you're not getting bit. Stick with me, because I'm going to show you how a fish sees your line from below, and it will change the way you rig up for cold, clear water forever. So let me ask you this right now. Do you believe a thin piece of plastic can really spook a fish that badly? Let's find out. Let's set the scene, because this is important. We're talking about late winter and early spring. The water is often at its clearest and it's brutally cold. Fish are lethargic, their metabolism is slow, and they aren't going to waste energy chasing something that seems even slightly off. For generations, the common wisdom has been simple. In clear water, use the clearest line possible. That led us all to fluorocarbon, and before that, clear monofilament. We tie it on, we trust it, and we repeat the process year after year. It becomes a habit, a rule we don't even question. But we rarely stop to think about the specific conditions of the day. We're so focused on what the line looks like in the water, we forget to ask what it looks like against a bright, low-hanging winter sun. Picture the perfect late winter day. It's cold, crisp, and the sun is out, but it's hanging low in the sky, not directly overhead like in the summer. There's no wind, and the water is as clear as glass. You can see the bottom 10, maybe 15 feet down. On paper, it's a beautiful day to be out, but in reality, these are often the toughest days to get a bite. You're casting to fish you can literally see, watching them swim right up to your lure, pause for a second, and then slowly turn away in complete refusal. It is one of the most frustrating experiences in all of fishing. You know they are there, you know they should be feeding, yet absolutely nothing you do seems to work. This exact scenario is the foundation for everything we are about to discuss. So you start the usual process. You change your lure color, you downsize your bait to something tiny and finesse. You slow your retrieve down to a dead crawl. You might even switch spots, thinking the fish are just too pressured. But the result is the same everywhere you go. You see fish, they see your lure, and they reject it. The common thread in all of this isn't the lure, the spot, or the retrieve. The common thread is the one constant in every single cast, your fishing line. We've been trained to think of it as just a tool to get the lure to the fish, but what if it's the very thing that's waving a giant red flag in their face? It's time we stop looking at the situation from the boat and start looking at it from the bottom of the lake. All right, let's completely flip our perspective. For the next few minutes, you are no longer an angler. You are a largemouth bass, or a big crappie, suspended about 10 feet down in that cold, clear water. Your world is dark below you, and the only significant light source is coming from high above. What you see isn't a wide-open view of the sky. Instead, your vision of the surface world is compressed into a specific phenomenon that scientists call Snell's window. Understanding this single concept is the key to unlocking this entire puzzle. Everything a fish sees above the surface, the trees, the clouds, your boat, is packed into a circular window of light directly overhead. Outside of that window, the water's surface acts like a mirror reflecting the darker bottom. Let's break down Snell's window a bit more simply. Imagine you're in a swimming pool and you look straight up. You can see the sky in a circle, but if you look up and to the side at a shallow angle, you see a reflection of the pool floor. That circle of sky is the fish's window to our world, and on a bright sunny day, that window is intensely bright, almost like a giant washed-out lamp hanging in a dark room. Now think about your presentation. Your lure is down in the water, but your line cuts directly through that bright window. It's not being viewed against the dark bottom or the murky midwater. It is being viewed against the single brightest part of the fish's entire world. This is the critical piece of the puzzle that most anglers miss entirely. The background behind your line changes everything. So, how does this bright background affect your line? Let's start by debunking the biggest myth in fishing, the invisibility of fluorocarbon. The reason fluoro is less visible than mono is because its refractive index is very close to that of water. This means light passes through it without bending much, making it hard to see when it's fully submerged and viewed from the side. This is absolutely true and a huge advantage in many situations. However, that advantage almost completely disappears when the line is silhouetted against a bright background like the winter sky in Snell's window. When you put any object, even a transparent one, in front of a bright light source, it becomes a silhouette. It's no longer about refractive index, it's about blocking or distorting that powerful light source. The silhouette effect is the real killer here, and it's something most of us never consider. We buy clear fluorocarbon because we're told it's invisible. And it is, when you're looking at it sideways in the water. But a fish isn't looking at it sideways. It's looking up. Imagine a thin piece of glass hanging in a bright window. You don't see the glass itself, you see the way it distorts the light, the way the edges seem to glow. Your clear monofilament or fluorocarbon line does the exact same thing. It acts like a tiny fiber optic cable. The low winter sun hits the line from the side and that light gets channeled along its length. So from the fish's point of view, it's not an invisible thread. It's a shimmering, glowing wire cutting through their ceiling. And in a world where survival depends on spotting anything unnatural, that glowing wire is a massive alarm bell telling them to stay away. Here's a real-world example you can try yourself. Take a piece of clear fishing line and go into a dark room with one window. Hold the line up a few feet in front of the window. You'll see exactly what I'm talking about. The line itself is hard to see, but its edges will seem to collect the light. It creates a defined and sometimes shimmering outline. Now do the same thing with a piece of dark green or black line. It doesn't glow, it doesn't shimmer, it simply creates a thin black line. It's a silhouette, yes, but it's a consistent and non-reflective one. One of these looks like a strange, glowing, unnatural filament. The other looks like a tiny twig, a strand of dead vegetation, or a pine needle that has fallen in the water, things a fish sees every single day and has learned to ignore. This leads us to a conclusion that feels completely wrong based on everything we've been taught. In these specific conditions, bright sun, low angle, and clear water, a darker, more opaque line might actually be less spooky to a fish than a clear line. Let that sink in for a moment. The line that is technically more visible to the human eye could be the one the fish is more willing to accept. Why? Because fish aren't making complex decisions. Their brains are wired for simple, binary choices. Is this food? Is this a threat? Is this normal? A thin, dark, non-moving line can easily be categorized as normal background debris. But a thin, glowing, shimmering line that follows a jig, that does not compute. It's unnatural, and the default reaction to something unnatural is avoidance. Let me tell you about a trip that hammered this point home for me. I was fishing a small, crystal-clear quarry in late February. The sun was bright, and I was marking huge schools of crappie suspended about 20 feet down. I spent the first 2 hours throwing every finesse bait I had on 6-pound fluorocarbon without a single bite. I could see them on the sonar swimming up to my bait and peeling off. My buddy, an old-timer who swears by his cheap monofilament, shows up. He's rigged with the same small jig I'm using, but he's got it tied to a dark, moss-green, 8-pound mono line. It's the kind of line most serious anglers would laugh at for this type of fishing. We all know how this story ends. He drops his jig down, and within 5 minutes, he's hooked up. And then again, and again. I'm sitting right next to him, watching in disbelief. We are using the exact same jig head, the exact same plastic, fishing the exact same school of fish. The only possible variable was the line. I was using the expensive invisible line, and he was using the cheap, highly visible dark green line. From our perspective above the water, his line stuck out like a sore thumb. But from the fish's perspective, looking up against that bright, hazy sky, my line was the one that was setting off alarm bells. My invisible line was glowing, and his dark line was just a thin, natural-looking stick. It was a brutal but incredibly valuable lesson. This isn't just about fluorocarbon versus monofilament. It's about the properties of the line itself. A clear mono will have the same glowing fiber optic effect as a clear fluoro in these conditions. The key is transparency versus opacity. A transparent line, regardless of material, is going to interact with that bright background light in a way that can look highly unnatural. An opaque line like black, dark green, or even a dark brown doesn't try to be invisible. It accepts that it will create a silhouette, but it creates one that is far less alarming. It's like the difference between trying to hide in a ghillie suit versus trying to hide using an invisibility cloak that glitches and shimmers every few seconds. Sometimes just blending in as something boring is the better strategy. Now, what about high visibility lines? Many anglers, especially those who vertical jig or watch their line for bites, love using bright yellow, orange, or chartreuse line. And for bite detection, they are fantastic. But if we apply our same logic, these are the absolute worst-case scenario for spooky, line-shy fish. From a fish's point of view, looking up at that bright sky, a high-vis line is like a bolt of lightning. It's an intensely colored, thick, unnatural band cutting across their entire field of view. The common practice is to use a long fluorocarbon leader to counteract this. But is a 10 or 20-foot leader really enough when a fish might be following your bait from a distance before committing? That main line is still casting a shadow and is visible from the periphery. The argument for a leader is a valid one, and in many cases it's the right call. If you need that high-vis line for bite detection, a long, clear leader is essential. But let's challenge that for a moment in this specific late winter scenario. The fish are finicky. They might be spooked by more than just the line itself. They could be spooked by the leader knot, that small point of connection that looks different from the rest of the line. Or they might be spooked by the different way the stiffer leader material moves in the water compared to the more supple main line. Sometimes the simplest approach is the best. Tying your lure directly to a main line that is designed for stealth in these specific conditions removes extra variables and potential failure points. It's a clean, simple presentation. So does this mean you should throw out all your fluorocarbon and clear line? Absolutely not. This is not a one-size-fits-all solution. This is a highly specific strategy for a highly specific situation. When it's overcast, or when you're fishing in stained water, or when the sun is high overhead in the summer, fluorocarbon's refractive index gives it a massive advantage, and it truly does disappear. This whole theory hinges on that one key environmental factor, a bright, clear background in the fish's field of vision. This is most common in late winter and early spring when the sun angle is low, the water is clear, and there's often bright, reflective snow on the banks, making the sky seem even brighter from below. It's about having another tool in your toolbox and knowing when to use it. Let's think about how fish have evolved. For millions of years, they've learned to identify threats from above. Herons, ospreys, eagles, they all create a silhouette against the bright sky before they strike. A fish's upward-looking vision is one of its most important survival tools. They are masters at detecting movement and unnatural shapes against that bright backdrop. So when we drag a thin, but still very visible, line through that window, we are triggering millions of years of predatory avoidance instincts. A dark line that mimics a piece of reed or a pine needle is just background noise. But a line that catches the light and appears to glow, that's an anomaly. And in the fish's world, anomalies equal danger. We have to think more like a prey animal and less like a marketing executive reading the back of a line spool. This also explains why some old-school tactics still work so well. Think of the classic bass fisherman from 30 years ago. He wasn't using $100 spools of imported fluorocarbon. He was likely using dark green or black stren or trilene monofilament, and he caught plenty of fish. We often dismiss these older methods as outdated, but maybe those anglers were onto something without even knowing the science behind it. By using a dark, opaque line, they were inadvertently creating a more natural silhouette against the bright sky than we are today with our advanced, clear lines. Sometimes the relentless march of technology in fishing takes us down a path that isn't always superior in every single situation. We need to be willing to look back and question if we've lost some fundamental wisdom along the way. Let's bring this back to a practical, on-the-water choice. You pull up to the lake, it's March 1st. The ice just came off last week. The water is 40 degrees and so clear you can count the rocks in 15 feet of water. The sun is shining brightly. You have 2 rods on the deck. One is spooled with your favorite 8-pound fluorocarbon. The other is spooled with a cheap 8-pound dark green monofilament. Which one do you pick up? Every instinct, every advertisement, every fishing show you've ever watched is screaming at you to pick up the fluorocarbon. But based on what we've just discussed, the smart, counterintuitive choice might be to grab that mono. It's a tough choice to make because it goes against everything we've been taught. The key is to be a thinking angler. Don't just blindly follow rules, observe the conditions. If it's a cloudy, overcast day, that bright window in the sky is gone. It's replaced by a uniform, grey ceiling. In that scenario, a clear line's ability to blend into the water column becomes the dominant factor, and fluorocarbon is absolutely the right choice. But when the sun is out, be willing to experiment. If the bite is tough, don't just change your lure. Consider changing your entire spool. Having a spare spool for your spinning reel with a dark mono, or even a micro braid with no leader, can be a day-saving move. It's about adapting your entire system, from rod to reel to line to the specific puzzle the day presents you with. Let's quickly recap the core physics at play one last time to make sure this sticks. 1. A fish's view of the sky is a bright circular window. 2. On a sunny day, this window is the brightest thing in its world. 3. Your line passes directly through this bright window. 4. A transparent line can catch light and glow or shimmer against this bright background, creating an unnatural fiber optic effect. 5. A dark, opaque line simply creates a thin, non-reflective silhouette. This silhouette is more likely to be interpreted by the fish as a natural piece of debris, like a twig or a strand of weed. It's a simple, logical progression that leads to a very unconventional conclusion. So the final thought for you to take to the water is this. The next time you find yourself in that classic, frustrating, late winter scenario, clear water, bright sun, and fish with lockjaw, take a moment and stop looking at your lure. Instead, look at your line as it enters the water. Think about what it must look like from 10 feet below, staring up into the sun. Is it a stealthy, invisible connection to your bait? Or is it an unnatural, glowing tightrope that's screaming danger to every fish in the area? The answer might be the only thing standing between you and a great day of fishing. It could be that the color and property of your line is the only thing the fish can truly see. So let's wrap this up. For years, we've been obsessed with making our lines invisible in the water, but we completely forgot to consider what they look like against the sky. The big mind-bending takeaway here is that in the specific, high-contrast environment of a bright winter day, our attempts at invisibility might be backfiring. That expensive, clear fluorocarbon could be lighting up like a Christmas tree from a fish's point of view. And the real stealth approach might just be a cheap spool of old-school dark green mono that creates a boring, natural silhouette. That is a massive paradigm shift. It means we might need to unlearn one of the most fundamental rules of finesse fishing. This isn't just a small tip. It's a completely different way of looking at your connection to the fish. Thank you so much for watching and for being willing to challenge some conventional wisdom with me. If this gave you something to think about, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more content that dives deep into the why of fishing. Now I have to ask you, what's the craziest fishing myth you've discovered is actually true? Or what's a golden rule you think is total nonsense? Let's get a good debate going in the comments below.